Hi, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, and this is a presentation to all of you, to the town. Hopefully, people will watch this, on the Route 3A Summer Road Diet. This is a pilot project that's part of a big 3A road improvement project. The 3A task force has been leading the coordination of this project for the last year. Deirdre Anderson, Paul Healy, Alan Peralt, Bryce Blair, and myself. I'm Judy Sneath. Tonight, Paul will introduce the meeting, and then Roger Fernandez, our town engineer, will go through an explanation of the project. We're also joined by Rob Cahoon of DCI Engineers, who was part of all the research and study that went into this design. After we get through with the presentation, we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. We're joined tonight by people from the DPW, by our fire chief, and hopefully you will all have your questions answered about this. So thank you all for coming.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Healy. I'm one of the three selectmen in the town of Hingham. We're about to embark on what we're referring to as a pilot program. And just to give a little sense as to where we came from and how we got here, we're talking about the Summer Street corridor. And this is the roadway that is used by a great deal of people to get to the town of Hull, as well as our own Hingham neighborhoods in North Hingham. We've seen statistically that the number of accidents in which personal injury has resulted in has been rising alarmingly over time. Historically, the roadway into Hull has seen various engineering changes over time. And over time is a relative term, but in the 30 years, last 30 years, Muzzie's Corner was re-engineered, redesigned. The top of Old Colony Hill was lowered. And now we're coming to the other side of the hill. We did a survey, the town did a town-wide survey looking to this through the energy and expertise of my colleague, Ms. Anderson. We compiled that, we analyzed it. Town meeting provided engineering funds, significant engineering funds, to study this in greater detail. That has been done. The DPW, through Roger Fernandez, Tom Molinari, DCI, Rob Cahoon here, has worked hard over the past couple of years to come up with a design working with MassDOT, Department of Transportation. I welcome you, gentlemen. And we are progressively publicizing this. This isn't the first public meeting that we've had, but this is an opportunity for the public here in Hingham, or anywhere for that matter, to come and see the presentation, hear what we're going to do. You're going to hear that in a few minutes. And we're going to repeat the same exercise tomorrow in the town of Hull, so that everybody will have a clear idea of what this entails. This is something that is new to the Department of Transportation, but the concept of it, I think, is a solid one. I'd ask if you come in here with a preconceived notion of what it is, hear us out, listen to the presentation. If you have questions afterwards, we welcome them, and we'll try to address them as best that we can. So at this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Roger, our town engineer here for the Department of Public Works.
And I'd like to welcome everybody to turn your chairs a little bit if it's more comfortable for you to look at the screen that way. So right about now, if there's a lot of rattling, it's just chairs moving. But
do we want the light on, or?
Roger, is it better with the light on or off?
I think maybe it might be better with the light off. Let's give it a try. There's a dimmer there, Tom, which you can turn down. Turn on the circle. It's not working? It's actually fine. Is it? Is better or worse?
Better.
Good. Good? Okay. First, thank you to the chair, thank you, Mr. Healy, for the introduction, and thank all the attendees for being here today. Again, my name is Roger Fernandez. As Mr. Healy indicated, I'm here with Rob Cahoon from DCI, and the purpose of the meeting is to acquaint you with this proposal. I do want to tell you that, just as a formality, as part of the public meeting requirements, the meeting is being recorded and videotaped to be televised on Harbor One, I think it's what it's called now. HCAM, okay. HCAM at some point in the future, and this is the first part of 2 meetings. The second to take place in Hull, and the presentation you're going to see today is the same presentation we're going to present in Hull. I also want to say thank you to members of MassDOT, Bill Travers and Dan Retzel, for coming today in attendance. We know that they'll be represented also in Hull tomorrow, so thank you guys for taking the time to come to today's meeting. So, just in terms of agenda, this is not going to be a long presentation, but we certainly think we'll be able to hit on all the main topics. First, of course, what are the limits of the project? And when we use the word project today, we want to make sure you understand that we're focusing just on this pilot, and we'll explain what that is in a moment. The intent of today's meeting is not to really delve into the whole corridor and what that might look like at some point in the future. I know that the task force is going to take on each and every one of those topics on sequentially, but this is the first step that will inform everything that happens hereafter. So we'll look at the limits of the project. We'll talk about the history of the studies, the stakeholders, and the collaboration that's taken place at this point, which has been extensive. We'll look at the existing conditions and safety concerns, and Rob will help with some of those technical aspects. We'll look at the roadway constraints and the proposed design. Again, when we say design, we're talking about a pilot at this point. We're not constructing or designing anything to be constructed at this point. And we'll talk about some detail in terms of the locations, some other analysis that have been done to this point that include travel time and capacity. And of course, we have to consider emergency apparatus and access. How does that work into this pilot? And at the end of this, we're going to collect data. We're going to see how that data informs, again, the next part of the design and how we can affect a management plan that's going to work in the future. So again, the limits of the road are ostensibly from the rotary headed east to the intersection of George Washington Boulevard and Rockland Street. It is sometimes referred to as Muzzy's Corner. It's approximately three-quarters of a mile in distance. And the objective is to undertake a pilot study of the impacts of a road diet. A road diet is a lane reduction, and in this case, it's a lane reduction from 4 lanes to 2 lanes by installing temporary traffic control delineators that reduce the amount of travel lanes. And there, you can see a rendering or photo of what that might look like. So as you exit the rotary headed east towards Hull, you would see some of these delineators. Tom, would you mind grabbing one of the delineator over there and just demonstrate what that would look like? And so the area in blue is the full study area, as blue as well as yellow. It's something we're going to look at down the road, but right now the study area is only the area highlighted in yellow. And when we say delineator, this is a yellow delineator. It would be used to delineate the center line. That's the extent of what would be installed. As a traffic control device, in addition to that, we're going to have a fair amount of signage, message boards, and all those things we need to inform motorists during the pilot. Thanks, Tom. So, what is the chronology? How do we get to this point? Well, it's been a process, certainly, dating all the way back to April of 2009. And at that point, I recall pretty vividly, we actually had Governor Patrick show up to the Rotary, and it was midterm, but in any case, he had visited the Rotary. We had talked about, we had looked at some alternatives at that time as to, what can we do to improve the traffic conditions. And since then, there have been a sequence of events. In 2013, we worked closely with MassDOT to develop a road safety audit. And what that is we meet with members of MassDOT and their team, along with residents, and we begin to delve into the issues on that particular corridor. What are some of the low-hanging fruit that could be done to sort of remedy some of that? What are some of the long-term things that can be done to sort of remedy some of the issues out there? And that report was developed back in 2013, and again, continues to inform the next process. In October of 2014, I'm sorry, that was June of 2013. In October of 2014, Hull and Hingham submitted a request to the state for a CTPS study. It's a Central Transportation Planning Staff study. That's a group that works with MassDOT out of the MPO office. They're a group of professionals, planners, engineers, traffic engineers, and I look at it as a grant. Ostensibly, it's about $100,000 worth of work, and that study is available online. And it really took an in-depth look at the corridor, everything from traffic counts to accident histories, traffic movements, levels of service. And when we say levels of service, we're talking about the operation of signals and how well they function in terms of moving traffic through those intersections. So it was really a great job, and it was really a launching point for the next phase, which is actually seeking funding at town meeting. And so a petition article was put forth in 2015, and the town did support funding the engineering money that we would need to advance the project to the tune of $400,000. In February of 2016, the CTPS study was completed. And in that same year, we commissioned DCI to work with us, and we began work on the 3A summer corridor and decided to look at some alternatives along that corridor. In spring of 2017, we began to start public discussion. We looked at traffic analysis, crash history, all the things that we had gathered from both the CTPS study and everything in the interim. And in the summer of 2017, we attempted to, candidly, to introduce the pilot that we're going to talk about today. So we met with our neighboring communities, Cohasset and Hull, and the officials there. And the sense we got back was it was a little too much, too soon, and it really hadn't been fleshed out properly. So with the necessary deference and respect, and to be candid, they were right. We needed to talk about this a little more. We needed to work with our friends over at MassDOT and develop a plan that was all-encompassing and considered all the different aspects. So we put the brakes on, so to speak, and we went back. And since then, as the next bullet states, we worked very collaboratively. We'll have a list of those folks who we work with. And we think at this point, we're really ready to introduce the pilot. So I use the word collaboration. What do I mean by that? Well, we've had a collaboration of 18-plus team members. They included regional community leaders, your representatives, and traffic engineers, civil engineers, project managers, planners, operation and maintenance folks, which I think is sometimes we don't think about that. And the public safety folks, they had met. We'll have a slide to demonstrate when they met, but coordination with them was very important. And from MassDOT's end, we met with the District 5, which is the district that Hingham and Hull are in, the Boston office, their traffic engineering group and project managing group. Again, we re-engaged the CTPS, those professionals. And in addition to those state and municipal agencies, we have, of course, DCI, and the state introduced their own consultant, Kittleson and Associates, to look at everything that's been done almost as a peer review. And from that peer review, they developed their own analysis, the VISM analysis, which you'll see some of those results in the simulation that was developed, and substantiated a lot of the Synchro and Sidra analysis. So those, when we use Synchro, Sidra, VISM, what we're really talking about is computer modeling of how the traffic will behave. Not only today, but how it would react if we began to introduce more traffic or higher volumes of traffic into that corridor and those intersections. And what we did in these particular models, I think it's important to know, we did not just look at the AM and PM peak travel times and the traffic at those points during the week. We targeted a summer, midday, 10 to 2 traffic period. The intent there was, let's look at the worst case scenario and see what happens. How does this affect the modeling? And again, you'll see those results, and the simulation will help illustrate that a little better. So again, I mentioned public safety, so very sensitive. The task force is certainly sensitive. We've been very fortunate to work with a great group of folks, both in Hull, Cohasset, and in Hingham, and they met on November 20th in 2017, and they met again in January 17th, 2018, and there was a consensus that the officials from all three towns will continue to work together, and will continue to meet and discuss, and they'll continue to develop their own encompassing evacuation plans. That's something that's in the works. But when we say continue to meet and discuss, for example, the first day that we hope to be able to install the pilot, the delineators that Tom showed you, is we want to call them up. We want to bring them to the site, bring them to the road. This is what we've put so far. What do you think? Is there anything that we need to change? If a couple of days go by and there's something that needs to be corrected, we have the opportunity to make those corrections with their input. So, as Mr. Healy indicated, so the impetus behind this really, in large part, is, well, it should be in large part, is public safety. And I'll ask Rob to come up in a moment and talk to this slide and some of the subsequent slides in a moment, but there's the problem we have here is there's a disproportionate amount of injuries to accidents. So over 40% of the accidents that take place along 3A result in injury. That's unacceptable. 40% of people cannot get hurt driving down that section of Summer Street. And you might ask, why? Why is it? We have 2 lanes, we have 4 lanes elsewhere. A lot of 3A is 4 lanes, and sure, we can, but the distinction here is twofold. One is that we're dealing with a horizontal and vertical curve that tends to force drivers to drift. So when we say we have 40% accidents at certain locations, in one location particularly, it's 50% injury to accident ratios. What ends up happening is if you do cross that double yellow line and you hit the oncoming vehicle, you have a 50% chance that somebody in that vehicle is making a trip to the hospital. When that information was presented to the town and the people you see in front of you now, it was an obvious, this cannot work. We've got to come up with a better way to address the safety concerns. I think MassDOT's recognized it, and I think by virtue of the fact that we've had this tremendous investment in time and effort by all the parties I just mentioned, both at the state level and at the local levels, the focus on this particular issue is clear. So with that, I'd like to ask Rob if he would come up and just sort of talk about some of the statistics in the next couple of slides.
Thank you, Roger. Just to provide a little bit of information about myself, my name's Rob Cahoon. I'm a project engineer with Design Consultants out of Somerville. We have an office in Quincy as well. And I've been in the transportation industry now for 20 years. And I've worked with Roger for off and on for the last 15 years or so. So I've traveled the corridor a number of times, been through the town of Hingham a number of times as well, and seen and understand a number of these issues. Before I go to the next slide, just want to point out to some of you who may have done some quick math in your head. You're going to add up, if you add up those crashes, in particular Summer Street and Steamboat Lane, Summer Street and Martins, and Muzzy's Corner, you don't come up with 56. And the reason is that those crashes that are presented or tabulated are just the ones that occurred at the intersections. There are some additional crashes that have occurred in between those intersections that are not necessarily tied to those locations. So that's why you see that differentiation there. Now, the slide is a little bit tough to see, so I would encourage you, again, if you want to look a little bit closer, to look online. This presentation will be posted, so you should be able to see this. What we have is a blow-up in the lower right corner of that section between the Rotary and Martin's Lane and then Muzzy's Corner. And what you can see is that that S-curve between the Rotary and Martin's Lane, there's a cluster of accidents that occur right by Steamboat Lane. And that is a result, as Roger said, of that horizontal and vertical geometry. So for 16 crashes to occur in that location, it's a fairly high rate. Number of those crashes tend to be either vehicles out of control, head-on collisions, or sideswipe. And by sideswipe, I mean cars that are trying to pass each other, or you also have sideswipe in the opposite direction where, you know, a car crosses the double yellow and they don't necessarily hit head-on, but they do crash. Number of those crashes could be attributed to speed as well as that geometry. When we look at crashes as designers and try to determine what improvements we should make to the roadway, we look at a number of factors in terms of what's the severity of the crashes, what types of collisions are occurring, lighting conditions, did the accidents occur at nighttime or during the day? The surface conditions of the roadway, are they wet, icy, as well as time of day? You know, do you see an issue in the PM peak hour when perhaps you have solar glare, or is it in the morning? So these are all factors that we look at when we're trying to determine what the best design for a roadway might be. Some of the concerns as we discuss are speed. As a result of the CTPS study, 85th percentile speeds are approximately 10 miles per hour over the posted speed limits on that section of roadway. So that posted speed limit is 35 miles an hour. You have 85% of the vehicles are traveling at a speed of 45 miles per hour or lower. So, and that data also showed that, you know, your average speeds are approximately 40 miles per hour, and about 15 to 20% of vehicles are traveling at the speed limit or below. So in reality, 80% are exceeding that posted speed limit. So the speeds in combination with the horizontal and vertical curves do contribute to the severity of the crashes and the disproportionate amount of injuries that occur on that section of roadway. In MassDOT's Complete Streets guidance, in citing the World Health Organization, an increase in 1 mile per hour in mean or average vehicle speed results in an increase of 3% incident in crashes, an increase of 4 to 5% in incidents of fatal crashes. Fortunately, at this point in time, we haven't seen necessarily that increase in the fatal crashes. We as designers and town officials don't want to see that become a statistic. We don't want to see this roadway become one of those statistics. To further illustrate the issues along the corridor, there's no bicycle or pedestrian or limited pedestrian accommodations along that stretch of roadway. It's not comfortable or safe to walk down the sidewalk when you have cars that are passing next to you within 2 feet of the sidewalk at 45 miles per hour. During the summer months, there's an uptake in bicycle traffic along the corridor. There's no room for the bicyclists. It's not safe for them to be riding their bikes. And as motorists, you run into that situation where, what do you do when you come across a cyclist? Do you swerve into the lane next to you, possibly hitting another car? Or do you have to jam on the brakes and avoid another collision? So again, this map shows the posted speed limits along the corridor and the travel speeds, the 85th percentile travel speeds that were recorded in the CTPS study. So north and east of Muzzy's Corner intersection of Rockland Street by the courthouse, there's a posted speed limit of 45 miles per hour, and vehicles are traveling on average, 85th percentile speed is only slightly higher than that 45. And vehicles are traveling about 47 to 48 miles per hour. Unfortunately, those speeds continue as you get into the residential section, and they don't slow down until you get down to the rotary. So it makes it a very uncomfortable situation and a very unsafe situation for the residents along that section of the corridor. And unfortunately, we also had a fatality up by the courthouse this past year of a pedestrian. Do you want to get into this part? Okay.
Thank you.
So with all these, with all the considerations, the design of the roads can have a considerable impact on the safety. Footpaths, cycling lanes, safe crossing paths, and other traffic calming measures can be critical in reducing the risk of injury among these users. Point being is that we can do things to fix this. It's a matter of developing a plan to do that. And what are those results? How may they, what's the benefit? What do we get out of that? Well, statistics say, based on Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, that sidewalks reduce pedestrian crashes by 88%. Shoulders reduce pedestrian crashes by 71%. And that's the Federal Department of Transportation. Medians reduce crashes by 40%. Road diets reduce crashes by 18 to 49% based on the Institute for Traffic Engineers. So again, there are things that can be designed or developed to fix what are the existing problems there now. So the state of Massachusetts owns the right-of-way. It doesn't belong to the town of Hingham, it belongs to the state. And within that right-of-way, there is limited geometry. There's a limited width to work within, and any plan will seek to maximize the amount of space available. So that redesign has to maximize that space, and based on the Massachusetts Department of Transportation design requirements, it must include sidewalks that provide ADA access, wheelchair compliant. It must provide bicycle lanes. These are not wants, they're requirements. The state has, for a number of years, has embarked on a multi-mobility strategy. They want to be able to have people walk on their streets and bicyclists use their roads. So how does that juxtapose with what's being proposed? Well, we just saw some of the statistics, but the lane reductions and medians, road diets, optimize street space to benefit all users. They reduce speeds. We saw the statistics. They improve safety and comfort for motorists, pedestrians, and bicyclists. And they reduce the severity of accidents. So these are things that are not new to this particular proposal. These are statistics that have been carried out and gathered by a number of agencies throughout the United States. So next we have a simulation video. And hopefully we can get this thing to work. Tom? What this is, as Tom prepares to hopefully just press play there, is a simulation of video that oh, good, we're moving along. That is of the worst case scenario traffic, meaning a Saturday, midday, beautiful, 90 degrees. They're able to plug this information into the simulation, model it, and when you see a truck, that's because that's the average amount of trucks that you would have seen on that day. In addition to that, you'll see those lines appear. They look blue, but I thought they were supposed to be red, green and red. But those lines represent stop lights when the lights change, and the movements that the vehicles would take under this fully built out heavy time of day scenario. Self-explanatory, so I'm not saying anything. So the road configuration that you're seeing in the simulation replicates what the pilot will do. So the lane reduction, the widening at the intersection to provide for capacity storage so that if someone's taking a left, for example, onto Martin's Lane, someone who's headed east on that corridor does not have to wait for that person. There's storage there on the left-hand side of the road, so that opens up from again, one lane that you can see to 3 lanes at that particular location. Then, as you continue east, past Martin's Lane, there's a transition area there where those cars then merge back into 1 lane, from 2 lanes back into 1 lane. This is a silent movie. And we have a simulation in both directions we'd like to show you. So on a busy day, you do see a little bit of an accordion effect. Traffic is heavy. And the red line there again represents the light turning red. Green line, vehicles move, it's a green light. Okay, and we have, if you would indulge us, just one more video. This video is westbound, and this will give you a sense of what it might look like exiting Hull and entering the rotary. Nobody's running the light, which is great. It's obeying the law. Yeah. So again, just want to remind you that this is based on actual anticipated traffic. This is not just a video. It's based on the collected data. I think we have here, actually, at this point, we may have actually pedestrian movement. So all the lights turn red, and I think it's difficult to see, but someone was walking across the street, I think. Again, back at Martin's Lane, it opens up to 3 lanes, 1 lane allowing for storage, 2 additional lanes allowing for some queuing at the light. And we're back to the rotary. In this video, everybody knows how to use the rotary. And we're almost there. And I will say, as this begins to wrap up, that usually when you work on a project where we're working with professionals like DCI and the state, this would be, even having a simulation like this is not necessarily something that you would introduce on every single project, but all the traffic modeling, the software that I had talked about earlier, this simulation and a pilot exceeds anything that anyone has worked, that we met with, that has undertaken to sort of make sure that developing a project that's going to work. So this is really pretty far and beyond what is normally done when you're introducing a project for consideration. So what will it look like? Again, earlier you saw a picture, a rendering, if you will, of what it would look like as a motorist as you exit, I should say, the roundabout headed east. To your left would be the Maritime Center, and you'd have the appropriate signage and the delineators. So as to public safety, one of your questions might be, okay, so what if an ambulance has to get by? Well, we've again met extensively with public safety folks, and what we've developed is a safety lane, if you will, or a public safety access that's highlighted, circled there with the hash on the hash marks on the pavement, where if an ambulance really needed to get by, they have the opportunity to pull into that lane. It's wide enough, and we'll show you an illustration of that in a moment. It's wide enough to accommodate them, and as they travel through that lane, there would be no vehicles in front of them. That would be the sole use of that lane would be just for emergency vehicles. In addition to that, the delineator that Tom showed you, the yellow delineator, can be driven over. It's you can literally drive over that. It'll bend at the base, so that in an instance where an emergency vehicle absolutely needed to go by, and there was a issue with the public safety access, they can pull right through and on top and over these delineators, and they simply pop right back up. And this is what they look like close up. I won't read every little bullet point there on the left, but they're epoxied down. And one thing that's really advantageous about these types of delineators is at the base, you can see that there's a bit of a hitch pin. So let's say, for the sake of argument, something goes sideways. We need to pull a number of these out or all of these out. How do we do that? Well, we simply go to the base of this post and we pull that hitch pin, and the vertical section of that is removed completely, and you end up with just the base that's epoxy down to the pavement. That base is designed to be ridden over The bases are going to be located on the dashed lines, so presumably if you're in your lane anyway, you won't be driving over these. And if you do, yeah, it'll bump. But they are designed to be driven over, and so we have the opportunity to dismantle these things pretty quickly if we needed to. And to illustrate my earlier point with respect to public safety and emergency apparatus access, is a rendering, tough to see, but you can, let's see, maybe this laser pointer works here. Yeah, so these two blocks are intended to represent a fire truck. They're to scale, so we know how wide and how long the fire trucks are. The lane that they're represented in right now is that auxiliary public safety lane, the lane where as motorists, we won't be driving in. You'll be driving in the lane closer to the center line. So these lanes will be providing an opportunity for those emergency folks to get by if they needed to. And I don't know, Rob, if you want to come up and talk about this as well, but I'll just touch briefly as Rob makes his way up, one of the things that the model provides us, besides the simulation, besides all the other data that we just talked about, is an actual projected difference in travel time. So we'll be able, Rob will explain, but we're able to hopefully measure through the modeling what that delta is, where we are today under existing condition and where we would be under a proposed condition. Again, the proposed condition representing the proposed pilot and how those differences might impact the total travel time.
Thank you, Roger. So one of the things that MassDOT's consultant, Kilson Associates, did for us as part of this project, they took a look at the corridor as it exists today with 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction, and they took the output of the program, said, what is my travel time from point A to point B? Basically from North Street to Muzzy's Corner, up at Rockland and George Washington. They also did travel time studies where they would drive the corridor a number of times to calibrate their model and try to figure out what those times would be. So as they calibrated their model, what they came up with is an average travel time in the current 4-lane section is 135 seconds. So it's about 2.5 minutes to get from North Street up to George Washington Boulevard. From there, what they did was they implemented this road diet pilot study and recalculated. Obviously, they can't necessarily simulate those conditions driving to check them. So relying on the model here, what they calculated was 167 seconds. This is in the eastbound direction during the summer Saturday midday traffic volumes. So that's when you have most of your traffic heading eastbound towards the beach. So the difference in time is only about 30 seconds increase. It's not 2 minutes, it's not 4 minutes, it's coming in at 31 seconds. So at the same point in time, in the westbound direction, when you don't have as much traffic heading westbound away from the beach during that midday peak hour, you're only talking an increase in travel time of 7 seconds by taking down one of those lanes. Part of the reason for this is when you're looking at traffic capacity and traffic demand, most of your delays occur at your intersections where you have your traffic signals. By keeping those intersections with the lane configurations that you have there now, with two through lanes and 2 receiving lanes, plus a left turn lane at Martin's Lane, it helps minimize that change and increase in delay. So those are those intersections are your limiting factors. By loading up the model and oversaturating it, so adding vehicles to it, Kittleson determined that they could process about 1,450 vehicles per hour per lane, which is more than what is currently found on the corridor. So we're not expecting any increase, significant increase in travel time. And again, this is for the summer peak condition on a hot day. As designers, we're not typically designing roadways for those conditions, but we're trying to be very conscientious about taking something away if it's going to cause an additional problem. For example, you don't design roadways around a mall for that Christmas traffic condition, or your roadways around a stadium for when that event is ending. If you do, you're putting a lot of money into infrastructure that is not needed the majority of the time. So how are we going to understand what is happening with this pilot study? We're proposing a robust data collection program that is going to extend throughout the study period, and it's not just going to be a snapshot of 1 day or 2 days. With MassDOT's assistance, we're looking to provide a lot of intelligent transportation systems out on site, from variable message boards that may adjust to some of the conditions, or can be adjusted to reflect some of the conditions out there. Looking at 7 radar units that would be used to collect volume data and speed data at various spots along the corridor. We're also looking at 5 Bluetooth receivers. These Bluetooth receivers will pick up signals from phones or from your vehicles and be able to identify what routes people are taking to get from North Street over to Nantasket Beach. As you can see or somewhat see in this figure, we have travel times posted on there. Those are average travel times taken from Google Maps. Most people have used that to figure out how long it's going to take me to get from point A to point B. I can't see my paper right now either with the darkness, but obviously the shortest route is along Summer Street, Rockland Street, George Washington Boulevard. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, and that's about 5 minutes to get I think it's 2.4 miles from along that stretch. The next shortest diversion route is the red line, which comes up to Muzzey's Corner, Rockland Street. Would take a left from when you're coming from Nantasket Beach, come down Kilby Street onto 3A and towards the Rotary. That it would be an increase in a couple minutes and about a mile of traffic if you were to divert that way. And then the other routes would be coming out Nantasket Ave, 228 to either Rockland Street or all the way out to Route 3A and coming back down. So those are the main routes that we're looking at to follow and understand what's happening with the traffic, where it's going. We're also going to have, with MassDOT's support there, they're providing 3 cameras that can be used to observe traffic out there on site. So if something happens, we're going to know about it and we're going to be able to react to it. In addition to those intelligent traffic systems, we're looking to count at several additional locations with your standard traffic counting methods. We're looking at another 10 turning movement counts. Those are manual turning movement counts conducted by people at those intersections during the peak hours. So they're gonna count what directions people, or how many cars are going each direction at that period of time, and that can be used to build models and follow where people are going. And we're also looking at a number of tubes. I'm sure most of you have seen tubes that have been placed on the roadway. So looking at tubes placed in another 7 or 8 locations all the way out to Nantasket Ave, and a number of places along 228, Route 3A as well. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Roger to talk about what the plan is, how things are going to be set up, and how long they're going to be out there.
Thanks, Rob. Just really quickly, just want to, one more quick thing on this, if I may. The cameras that Rob just mentioned, those are web-based, and a list of access to those, or a list of folks who will can access those, will be provided to MassDOT for their consideration as an opportunity actually for those, for that video, if you will, coming from those cameras to be broadcast directly to our public safety folks. So if you're the fire chief, which is here now, and he wants to see what's going on potentially on George Washington Boulevard, he can jump on his computer and he can see real time what's happening. In addition to Rob talked about those Bluetooth devices, and prior to that we had a slide that illustrated the travel time and what we think that should be based on the computer modeling. Those Bluetooth devices will tell you in real time. Okay, Roger started at North Street, he drove to the top, he's got his cell phone with him. Okay, Rob said it was going to take 160 seconds to get from that location to the top of the hill, North Street to the top of the hill. It took him 170 seconds. That information is also real time, so we'll be able to understand how close the condition matches the modeling. Okay, so in terms of when we want to implement and what we want to do, the hope is to begin a setup of the ITS equipment that Rob just talked about, the data collection equipment, if you will, on and around April 19th to the 23rd. That will not impact you. That's just us putting out that traffic data collection stuff that we just talked about. We want to be able to set up some variable message boards that tell motorists what to expect in advance of the actual installation of the delineators, and we're hoping that that takes place sometime in and around May 3rd. And at some point thereafter, we're shooting for May 20th. We want to actually install the road diet delineators, the stuff that, again, we've been talking about, so that if you were to, again, drive up that road at some point after May 20th, you would see the reconfiguration, if you will. And we're anticipating completion of the road diet. That means taking all this down and removing that equipment and the traffic management devices in and around July 30th. And we say July 30th, but I just want to caution you, if for some reason we end up with 4 weekends or 5 weekends where it's a washout, it's a monsoon, the whole point of doing this is we're trying to capture the worst case scenario. So we want to make sure we have. So if that does not happen, then that might need to be extended. So municipal and state officials will continue to communicate and monitor the project in all the ways we just described. And we'll continue to keep the public informed through the use of visual message boards, municipal websites, MassDOT websites, along with ongoing press releases and social media where it's appropriate. And finally, we want to just remind you that the purpose of this pilot program is to test the viability of the road diet by collecting data that measures impacts and informs future dialogue. I can't tell you enough how this is extremely unique, and given the impacts, how the understanding of that sensitivity of those impacts are the reason why we're doing this. So this is just a test, and then at some point in the future, we'll receive that data, and that will help us with the next steps. So with that,
Let's turn on the lights.
let's turn the lights on. Prepare yourselves.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
And Rob, for all that information. And I would love it for anybody who has questions or comments or feedback on this, to raise your hand. I'll call on you. Let us know. You please come up to the microphone. Let us know your name and your address, and take it away. Please, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I hate to go first. I'm Clark Frazier. I live at 50 Bonnie Briar Circle. I drive on this piece of road every day. And just from my own driving strategy going down the hill, I try like hell to make sure that nobody's beside me on either of those turns, because it is really dangerous. And unfortunately, that means that sometimes I go down the hill faster than I want. So I have a couple of concerns. Number one is I understand that the final road, if it's actually done, would have some kind of median in it, similar to what's in Quincy. Is that correct?
There is a potential, yep, for that,
But
correct.
this will not have a median, and that's my first concern, is because I'm as much concerned about oncoming traffic as I am about pickup trucks going down the hill beside me.
So there will be these barriers,
Yeah, but I'm
but
just
no
wondering-
built median.
I mean, I realize the problem that you have to have the safety lanes on each side for the emergency vehicles, but that sort of limits the amount of space between oncoming traffic. I'm concerned about that.
Okay,
My second concern is I really want this to work, because I think that you don't have an option to keep the road the way it is, because it's not safe.
right.
And I don't know what the final thing, did you put a sidewalk on the other side, or how are you gonna do it? Or you
Okay.
don't know?
Thank you, Mr. Frazier.
I
We'll
mean,
talk
that's-
a little bit about that in
But
answer to your question.
Those are my main concerns.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So do you just want to describe,
Sure.
one,
What-
why we can't put in a median right now, and whether Pete drivers should be concerned
I'll
about
go
that?
real brief, and then I'll let Rob. So just a reminder that the proposed center lane delineators would represent nothing more than what's there now. And at the very least, they would provide a visual separation between the oncoming traffic. So, I don't want to speak for Rob, but I certainly want to say that, it's impossible to guarantee that somebody isn't going to do something that's completely crazy. We can't, there's just no way to do that. But if the position is it worse or better, we would submit to you that it's better with the actual delineators identifying the center lane. Rob, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Correct, providing greater separation was one of the considerations early on in this pilot study. After several iterations and going back and forth, for the simplicity of setup and takedown over this short period, especially if there were some sort of incident that we said, you know what, this is not going to work the way we intended or the way we were hoping, we'll be able to remove it. If we were to try to provide a temporary median or a wider median with delineators, we'd certainly end up having to restripe the roadway and get into a lot of temporary activities just to make that happen, and it's not going to be able to be set up quickly and taken down quickly. So again, to Roger's point, putting the delineators on the double yellow line, we're not pushing any traffic closer to each other. We're keeping those lanes separated, but you're not going to have somebody next to you going down the roadway at the same time. You're only going to have one lane in opposite directions through those sections.
Thanks, Rob.
I'm concerned because I see people crossing the line frequently, and I am concerned about that.
Definitely. Does anybody else have a question or a concern, sir?
Hi, my name is Bill Boardman. I live at 25 Windsor Drive. I just wondered, is there any information about the efficacy of this proposed work as far as reducing crashes or personal injury?
So we have the statistics that Roger presented earlier in the presentation about the design elements and what the anticipated reduction is of each of those design elements. Do you have anything to add to that?
Not really. I think it'd be tough to.
As we discussed a little bit, or touched on, a number of the incidents, the crashes that do occur along this section of the corridor are either sideswipe or head-on collisions, in particular, or by Steamboat Lane. So by reducing the roadway to single lane in each direction, and adding a vertical barrier in between a raised median, you're going to be significantly reducing or eliminating that potential for those types of incidents to occur.
But you don't have any particular figures on what that might be?
No.
Okay, or what about rear-end collisions and people, being packed in one stream of traffic?
I think what you're asking us is, hey, guys, can you project what's going to happen when you try to improve what you know is going wrong? And the answer to that is no. Okay, the reason why I think we could, so what we're saying to you, I think, with again, this is not solely the Rob and Roger show, with support from professionals like Bill and MassDOT, is that this approach is going to make it better. Quantifying how that better looks is a very difficult task.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. It is what it is then.
Yeah. Thank you for the question.
If I could just add to that, I think that's the purpose of the pilot program, to measure the efficacy of the design. And, we're confident that it can work, but this is kind of a belt and suspenders effort to make sure that it will. And if there's something that was missed or overlooked, we'll find it in this undertaking and cure it going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes?
Hi, I'm Ches Coyle. I reside at 41 George.
Sorry, I didn't hear your name.
Ches Coyle.
Okay.
I reside at 41 George Washington Boulevard, and I just want to know if any of your data accounted for the increase in speeds after Muzzie's Corner. So I put my kids on the bus at 8:20 every morning and get them off at 3:20, and I will through June 20th. And so I imagine all of these cars going on one lane, and then they get to Muzzie's Corner at that light, and everyone disperses and speeds because they've been, putting along. And I'm just curious if that.
The study really did focus on right up to Rockland
Yeah,
Street.
there's 8 houses there
Right,
that all have children.
right. So, to answer your question, the road diet should reduce speeds along the corridor. As you see right now, based on the data that we have over at George Washington, 85th percentile speeds are about where, what the posted speed limit is along that section of
10 miles
George
over.
Washington. No, the 10 miles over is is on the Rockland Street section. It's about, a couple miles over the 45-mile-per-hour speed limit over on George Washington.
But I guess my concern is that post Muzzie's Corner, that light, they're going to then increase even more than just that.
Excuse me, Ms. Coyle. Is the speed limit after that light then 45 miles an hour?
It
Yes.
does increase to 45 miles
So the
per hour.
cars will increase their speed after the traffic light?
I understand that.
Oh, okay.
I just am saying that I think they will increase more than that. Standing there, I watch how fast they go by as it is. And if a bus is stopping, the cars don't stop around the school bus as it is. So I just fear that they're all just going to
Right.
pile up behind and speed around even more because they've all been in a one lane up until that point.
The, certainly, with the
Yeah.
data collection process, we'll be monitoring the traffic. I can't equivocally say what people will do, but with the data collection that we will be doing, we will be able to see.
Is there
in the
any
long
reason
term.
that you didn't include that portion of George Washington Boulevard, since there are residences there?
That was beyond the limits of this
Well,
project.
Maybe I asked the
Wait.
board.
Well, I
Yeah,
could
you
just,
should
if
ask the board.
if I may, just, I wanted, actually, the CTPS study did include Hull, past, all the way up to Nantasket, Atlantic Ave, and yeah.
I
so
see
all
the
the way.
blue, but the pilot doesn't include that.
No, but I think where you're at, the initial study, CTPS study, did include that section of George Washington Boulevard, and what that report came back with is, what Rob's just described, is that the speeds did not grossly exceed the posted speeds, the accidents weren't there, the levels of services at the lights didn't represent an issue. And then the other thing is, that if there's an additional sensitivity to the traffic patterns and the flows, that's something we would really want to make sure that we bring Hull in to talk about and not speak on their behalf in that particular case.
Well, that's Hingham.
No, just after the George Washington Boulevard, are you talking about past
It's
the water?
Hingham.
Okay.
Just for the 8 houses.
Oh, just at the courthouse, yeah.
So I'm glad that you brought that up. I think that they responded, just to repeat what they said, is that the speed will increase to 45, and that in the study, it showed that the speeds there weren't 10 miles over the speed limit the way they were in this other section. They were only a couple of miles an hour over, that the accident rate in that area was
Go
not.
back to that. I thought there were 6, it seemed like there were 6 accidents. Is that right, in that slide?
There were, you had some,
So what I propose to you, and Roger, can you confirm this, will having counters and having that Bluetooth show the amount of time that it takes to get from one point to another, so we could see, again, what the speeds are on that stretch of roadway just beyond, or will we only be capturing speeds in the pilot?
In the Bluetooth, let me, just bear with me one second, see if we can make sure we answer that correctly.
Judy, I think it's worth pointing out that, as Roger said earlier in his presentation, the point of this
Thank you.
pilot study is in a restricted area, but the scope of the project is broader. So a number of you, I'm assuming, will have questions about other intersections or places like this. That doesn't mean they won't be addressed. It's not the point of the pilot study.
Right.
And we will look at the counters, but I think people have to understand the project as a whole, when it's done, is going to be broader than what we're doing. This is step one.
Right, and not to get detoured into other areas already, but it is interesting to know whether the counters will give
The
us
answer is
any
yes.
indication of this.
The answer is yes, there's
Okay.
an additional counter closer to the courthouse.
So
we will
we'll
be
have a
able to tell you
measure
what
of
those
that
speeds are.
stretch. So, thank you for your question. Yes?
Cindy Heidel, 63 Guilford. I just have a couple questions. The people who live along Summer Street, who have driveways, will they be able to come out because of that empty lane between them and the traffic? Will they be able to take left-hand turns down Summer Street?
It's a good
Or up?
question.
I mean, I don't know how far apart those things are.
No, the answer to that is no. So if we don't have any, we did not introduce any breaks into the delineator, so if you do have to turn around, if you will, if you're headed west, you've got to go through the rotary, and if you're headed east, you've got to make a turn somewhere at the lights at Rockland Street.
So you won't be able to,
Or at the top.
you won't be able to cross the center line, but you will be able to get out of your driveway, but
Sure.
just in one
But
direction.
only to the right.
Yes.
Other than Steamboat and Button Cove. But if you have a driveway,
Yeah, but those are intersections.
you have to take
You
a
can
right.
only go to the
Yeah.
right. Okay. I really appreciated the traffic simulation. I thought that was great, but clearly it doesn't show those rare, but they happen, times when all of Nantasket Beach is emptying out, and it's a steady stream coming west out of Hull, 2 lanes, so I know you can't do anything about that, but it does happen, and your simulation, it may be average, but it doesn't show those. But my question is this. So you only have one lane now coming west out of Hull, and if there is a steady stream of traffic, what's to prevent the traffic from blocking the intersection at the top of Martin's Lane? I mean, if once people start through the intersection, the light turns red, and I just, and related to that is, so if you have all these monitors, are they directly tied into the local police department so that they would know immediately that we have this huge traffic exodus and we're blocking intersections and people are really not happy?
Yeah.
So those are my main questions. And I also completely agree with the first man who spoke. I am terrified of the head-on collision thing. I drive up and down that road, round trip, every single day, 40 years. And I stay to the right because I just missed being in one of the S-curve accidents, and you really don't want to be in that center lane. So to me, that's a big concern, and I know you can't do anything about it in the pilot study, but those are really big concerns for me.
Thank you. So I just wanted to answer, if I could, the two questions. One is, can we do something about the gridlock should people move into the intersection before the light turns? And no, we can't. People have to
That is a
obey
motor
the
vehicle
traffic
violation.
laws. Excuse me?
You just said it.
Yeah. But the thing that will happen is we will have these 3 cameras along the roadway so that if there's a problem as we're being monitored, typically those times when there's an exodus from Hull have to do when there's an extreme weather situation. Usually the cars leave, the traffic gets heavier at that time of day, but typically when there's weather. So all I'm saying is it will be monitored, and it can, the police can send out support, or in the worst case situation, it would be dismantled.
Correct. Yeah, you said it succinctly. Yep.
I'd just like to add to that. Ladies and gentlemen, our Hingham Police Chief's been very proactive in this effort, and you can be assured that our police force is going to be proactive in this particular exercise. This is a town-wide effort that's being undertaken here between police, fire, engineering, and the town hall, along with the state.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Keith German, 104 Kilby Street. I understand that this is a pilot program with the hopes that it'll decrease motor vehicle accidents, personal injury, and/or hopefully never, but casualties or fatalities. Will the project still be deemed a success if all those things happen, but the volume of traffic exponentially increases on Kilby Street, which is a known cut-through for the beach in both directions, and/or Hull Street? If we decrease those fatalities and accidents, and that's a win for everybody, don't get me wrong, but we then kick that can down the street, literally, to another residential neighborhood, 2 of which, Hull or Kilby Street, are we still going to consider the project a success after we collect all the data?
Thank you. It's a great question.
It's a good question.
I'd like to respond to that if I could, Mr. German. That is one of the purposes of the pilot, to determine whether the effect of what's going on here results in increased capacities on the side streets of the town of Hingham, as well as the town of Cohasset. And we'll be measuring that. And in accumulating the data, we'll analyze it, and we'll figure out whether that in fact has occurred or not. And if it has occurred, what steps, if any, can be taken to address that.
Sir? Clark, let's let everybody else. Thank you.
Mike Mullen, 14 Lambert's Lane, Cohasset. Now, what you just said is, so they already have the data for what's on Hull Street now. Because right now, I'm taking right-hand turns out of Hull Street because the traffic's so bad. And if you put in your, like he said, your GPS to find out the shortest way, when you're in Hull, the shortest way out of Nantasket Beach on your GPS will bring you right down 228, all the way to Gardner Street, and bring you right up to the highway that way. So you're gonna increase the traffic that way. So that says, as long as the state has the data from last year, from what the traffic count was from these dates, that's about the only real time you're gonna get the
Well,
data, right?
That's one of the beauties of this project. We're going to be able to measure that, and we're going to be able to evaluate and assess it.
From the
We know
data
it-
from last year.
We know what the existing volumes are, we have them. We'll collect additional new data, new volumes, and we'll have a baseline and something to measure it up against. That's why we're doing all this.
You know, like he said, I just want to make sure it's not just kicking it down the road. He's probably got the most dangerous intersection in town.
We absolutely don't want to shift the problem to other areas.
Yeah, Maggie.
Maggie Merrill, 147 Martins Lane. You talked about there being, one of the key reasons for doing this, in addition to making it safer, was to, somewhere down the road, accommodate pedestrians, bikers, and ADA. Is there going to be any accommodation for that during this test time? And where and how would that go?
So we are not specifically calling out accommodations for that. The existing sidewalk will stay. And part of the problem with doing that is introducing an element that says, hey, bicyclists, come use this, or hey, let's take, for example, the emergency access that we're working with the public safety folks with. We don't want to, it's not designed that way, it's not intended to be used that way. So we are not introducing anything in the pilot. Remember, this is just a temporary condition right now.
Okay.
Yep, good question, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll be signed.
Jeff Anderhan, 73 Canterbury Street. I think what my main concern is the impact it's going to have on the neighborhoods also. And being a resident of Canterbury Street for over 30 years, I'm a lifelong resident of the town of Hingham too, but I've seen traffic patterns change. I'll go back to the 228 project. Traffic was diverted down Canterbury Street. It was 5 years before that traffic really started not coming there as much. It took about 5 years for it to, go where it went originally. My other problem is Canterbury Street, 66 Canterbury Street to Rockland Street, there is no sidewalk. There is to 66 from Hull Street. This is a very dangerous area. And when traffic is diverted to this area, whether there's an accident on the George Washington Boulevard or there's an accident on Hull Street, it cuts through Canterbury. There is not a sidewalk there, so it's a huge concern of mine because I have an 18-month-old granddaughter that I have to walk with, and I can't go that way at all. My kids, I used to have to walk them down years ago. They went to Tower Day Camp, which was on Canterbury Street. And, it was always an issue. I was always, kind of road scared. You had to really keep an eye on things there, which you still do. The other thing is they're going to be beginning construction on Canterbury Street. They're going to be building there. There's going to be a number of houses coming in there. So that end's going to be out for me, going out that way. There'll be a lot of heavy equipment coming in and out of there. The other problem is just the way the traffic flows in that whole area. Every time something goes on, it does change quite a bit. I think there are other considerations that need to be made here too. You lived on Canterbury for a number of years, Paul, so you know what that sidewalk's like. And
Very well
it's
aware of
tough.
Canterbury Street.
It's a tough area.
It can be.
They have to
for
really
sure.
consider the neighborhoods surrounding it. I don't disagree. That boulevard has been terrible forever. I mean, they've made many, many changes to it. At one time, it was a speedway going down at Muzzie's Corner. Traffic they flew through there, which they still do. I think that, anything that can be done there is an improvement, but, don't impact the neighborhoods, please.
We're trying very hard not to, Jeff. I mean, that's why we're studying the traffic volumes on Hull Street to see, what increase, if any, there might be, or going down Rockland Street on a Kilby. We're very aware of that, as well as going out into Cohasset, too. You know, like I say, I lived on Canterbury Street, so I know exactly what you're saying. I think the street has changed.
It's definitely
Tower
changed.
Day Camp's not there anymore, so you've got that housing. You've got a new neighborhood coming in Jordan's old house. And, you know, when the golf course is open in the summer, the volume picks up going through there. There are a lot of things that speaking to, but, you know, I can't stress enough, ladies and gentlemen, this is designed to measure what the impacts would be if it necked down from 4 to 2 lanes on a very short strip on Summer Street. That's it. And, you know, we've got traffic measuring devices that are unparalleled. You know, I spent 10 years permitting the shipyard, and the kind of traffic analysis that was done on that project doesn't even come close to the kind of efforts that are being undertaken here. So we'll pick it up, we'll find it, and if there's a problem, that's part of addressing it.
Well, in 2 weeks, I'll have 40 years with the Department of Public Works. And, you know, I've seen the traffic flows in these areas, and I've driven them day in and day out, you know, in all types of weather. And they just seem to be getting worse. You know, there's more travel on these roads, and I don't think Hull Street can handle the kind of traffic you're going to shift that way.
We'll see.
We're going to find out shortly.
Thank you for your service in the Department of Public Works. Does anybody else have a question? Yes.
Hi, Diane Jordan, 16 Old Colony Road in Hingham. My street is off of Summer Street, the main street that comes up the hill, but then it turns. From my house, I have heard multiple accidents. I could hear the crashing. I can hear people screaming. I've witnessed accidents. I've been the victim of road rage by driving the speed limit, which is 35. So people that don't want to drive the speed limit are a part of the reason why I think this is so necessary. I drive 35 up the hill. People go around me, they beep, they flip me off, they yell at me. That's the speed limit. It's a very dangerous road. If you're driving in the right lane, the right side, you've got potholes, you've got drains, you're being bounced around. You've got a car right next to you. If you drive, and you have sometimes people pulling out of their driveways. If you're driving in the outer lane, you've got people flying past you where your mirrors are almost touching. It's such a dangerous roadway. Something needs to be done. I hope the side roads aren't impacted, and I hope that people understand how necessary this really is to do. I've lived there 10 years, and I can't tell you how many times I've just wished, it is just a small stretch of road, do something to fix it, make it better. And I'm hopeful. I think we're heading in the right direction. I'm hopeful that this works. I really am. To me, it's exciting. It's going to be a pain in the neck, but it's going to save lives. It's going to just a little extra time. That's all it's going to take on everybody's part to get from here to there, wherever you're going. That's all I wanted to say. I'm just grateful that this is happening, and I hope it works well.
So do we. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you.
Bill?
Hi, my name is Bill Reardon, and I live at Ground Zero on Steamboat Lane. Sounds as if Steamboat Lane is kind of where it's happening. I've lived on this corridor since 1956, Steamboat Lane or Summer Street, all within the corridor. As the woman before me has just spoken, I've listened to too many screeching brakes and then the fire engines and the traffic. So the notion of our redesigning this portion of the road is just very important for this section of town, and I applaud it, and I recognize that this is a test, and in order to verify whether what DCI has designed long-term for this corridor is going to work, we need the pilot. So I share your enthusiasm. I do have just a clarifying question to Cindy Heidel's question. I'm having looked at and understood what was planned for this portion of the corridor, will the pilot mimic all of the openings? This goes beyond Steamboat Lane, but Barnes Road, Button Cove Road. I know that in the ultimate design, there is a capacity to cross the street, and I just didn't know whether the pilot mimics that completely, or whether it will simply mandate if you come out on Summer Street, if you're on the right-hand side of the road, you can only go east, and if you're on the left-hand side of the road, as I am, you can only go west, and you go to the rotary and turn around. I'm fine with that, but I'm just curious, because those of us who live in the area know full well you don't take a left-hand turn going east if you're coming out of Steamboat Lane, because you're subjecting yourself to the risk of being killed. So a lot of us do this already, but I'm just curious for the pilot, what's the intent and the degree to which the pilot will mimic the ultimate end game for this portion of the corridor.
Thank you.
Go ahead, do it.
Yes, the answer is yes. We're intending to, as best we can, mimic what is in the preliminary design stages in terms of openings in that median for the pilot study, and what we would be looking at based on feedback we had received up to this point regarding openings, or where openings would be in that median in the future design, should it proceed in that direction.
Here's the good news, you'll only have to cross one lane to do it now, so if you're okay, so instead of crossing two. So.
The man behind Clark, and then Clark, because he's been waiting. You, yes, sorry.
Eric Ruth at 17 Old Colony Road. I can't contest what Diane has said about these accidents, but one question on the pilot. You know, we know as the tightness of the S-curves that people get really close to each other, shoulder to shoulder. Is there a plan to kind of flatten out the curves? I'm sure there will be in the final scheme, but is that kind of what you're going to do with the delineators?
As part of the pilot, the delineators are going to follow the existing striping that's out there. In terms of the final design, working within the right-of-way, we'd be looking to make as many geometric improvements as we can within that scope. So,
and I think with the delineators there, people will somewhat pay a little more attention. They'll almost get tunnel vision going through there. They won't want to hit them.
Hopefully.
So I think that should
We
keep
hope.
people at a slower speed, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
thank you. Clark?
Two quick things. One is I noticed in the simulation, the cars leaving the intersection at Summer Street would speed up and then slow down. I hope, after the light turned green, they would speed up, and then the simulation would show them slowing down. I hope that that's not really the case. But the second question, more pertinent, is in the rotary, coming in the rotary, are you showing 2 lanes going in?
Yes.
Because I sometimes think the 1 lane going into the rotary might work better. And what we see now on a Saturday, when you have a lot of traffic coming down Summer Street successfully, you have a backup at North Street. And I'm thinking that if this works, you won't have the backup at North Street. So
Thank you. This project is that yours?
Yes, unfortunately. Tell them we're not taking
That
mail
is
bids.
nice.
I could take it for you.
I'm sorry.
This project just goes from just beyond the driveway at Lincoln Maritime East. Will, for now, the rotary will, in this redesign plan, will change to some degree, but we don't have the full specs.
I'm just wondering about that, but I do think that if this works, you're going to see less backup on North Street at the worst times at the traffic signal. So
It'll be interesting for all of us to observe.
but we'll find out.
That's why we want to do it.
Thank you. Yes, please.
If you don't mind, can I stand
Yes, just speak loudly.
I'll speak loudly. I'm David Bonlesica, I live on Martin's Lane. I'm a supporter of this project. I drive that corridor every day, and I know all the bad habits that probably myself would be included is doing. The questions I have as part of the study are, will the problems of people traveling westbound, turning left onto Water Street, or people coming around the rotary going east and want to turn left at the Lincoln Maritime Center, will those be included in the study? Will there be a solution offered for some of the congestion and, quite frankly, some of the hazards that those turns pose?
So is your question whether or not we'll be monitoring traffic going in and out of the Maritime Center and Water Street in this pilot?
Yes. Is it
Yes.
part of the road diet scope?
It's not.
It is not.
No, but the redesign project, the safety improvements, if you think back to that first map that Roger showed in his presentation, there was a blue line that stretched from the bathing beach all the way to Muzzy's Corner. So those two intersections will be included in the overall safety improvement redesign. Thank you. Yes?
I just want to address Ms. Coyle's comments, and is that can be part of our public service announcements as part of the pilot, is the critical nature of the bus stops along George Washington Boulevard and Summer Street. And that has been a perennial problem, you know, at 6:51, 7:45, and 8:26, a bus stops heading westbound on Summer Street. And the Hingham Police have been really great partners with us when parents have called in, you know, non-compliance with buses. So we just need to get out those times because they're very predictable. We have 3 weeks left of the school year when this, probably 4, when this pilot gets underway. So I think it's going to be promoting those times so people know that the bus is going to stop. But just for clarification, the Rotary and George Washington Boulevard are not included in this pilot study. And because that can be a lot of online chatter about that, and I just wanted to clarify that. Thanks. All right.
Okay, do you have anything else
No.
to add? Well, thank you, Roger.
very
Thank you,
much.
Ron.
Great job, both
Thanks,
of you.
everyone, for coming, and please stay in touch. Thank you.